Hello and welcome to the presentation of a paper XFORM Adversarial DRL for Metamorphic Malwares on Generation. My name is Mohit Sevak and I am from Microsoft Security and Compliance Division, and with me are co-authors Dr. Sanjay Sahai and Hemant Rathod and Bits Plan. We'll be covering the following agenda for this presentation. Most of the latest generation malware are encrypted malware, but even within encrypted malware, there are two types of malware. One is the first generation malware, which is simple encryption. The second is a second generation malware, which uses advanced encryption, and it could even change the encryption keys, the encryption structure, or it could even change its code and then re-encrypt itself. These type of malwares are called metamorphic malwares, and the specialty of this malware is that they can change their structure with every infection, and hence no defensive mechanism could be trained on them even using powerful machine learning and deep learning techniques. Therefore, in this paper, we present XSwarm, a novel technique that is based on adversarial DRL system. And then using this technique, we create a lot of different types of instances of different types of malware with the hope that these type of simulations and the data that is created from this could be used to train defensive mechanism. Now, one specialty of the system as compared to a general perturbation-based system is that it creates functionality preserving malware, which are very essential to create any defensive mechanism for an endpoint system or a malware defense system. Now let us understand the positioning of such a defensive mechanism from the perspective of the commercially available products and the terminology used. So most of the modern end-to-end systems contain something called a managed threat detection and response, which houses two different types of responses. One is for the network, which is called an intrusion prevention and detection system, and the second is for endpoint, which is called an enterprise endpoint detection and response system. These two could be mostly connected for a very good response, but sometimes they are also disconnected. So we'll talk about the endpoint detection and response system, which contains a malware detection system, which commonly in colloquial language could be called an antivirus, but in most of the good products, that is more than an antivirus product. And in some of the most recent or advanced products, there's something called an advanced threat detection and protection system. These advanced threat detection and protection system, which is called ATP, actually can be used for two different purposes. One is a advanced threat detection, and in some cases, so this could be housed to also do an advanced attack mode protection. In advanced attack mode protection, there is something called a zero-day attack. Mostly this zero-day attack terminology is used in the case of a zero-day vulnerability in a software product, but it could also be used sometimes to identify a new type of risk or a new type of malware systems. Then there's something called a swarm attack, in which multiple types of malware do a targeted attack on a very high value resource. Then in advanced threat detection, there are defenses for metamorphic malware, ransomware, and so on and so forth. So this type of defensive mechanism that we are talking about actually combines all these paradigms of advanced threat protection into a single layer. Here we cover some of the related art in the field of adversarial learning and adversarial defense mechanism in the field of cybersecurity. So primarily it started with GAN-based approaches. So people borrowed GAN ideas from the vision domain, in which there is a generator system and a discriminator system. Discriminator system is mostly an existing malware defense system or malware detector. And the generator systems create some sort of a perturbations or other features which the detector could not detect, and hence it will create an adversarial mechanism to make it robust. Mostly these type of GAN-based approaches are used in the network intrusion detection system in cybersecurity. That is what we covered in the last step. Then there are reinforcement learning-based approaches. These reinforcement learning-based approaches are mostly classical RL algorithm, which means they suffer from high cardinality action and state spaces, and the only thing that they can handle is mostly low cardinality space and very simple state action spaces. And therefore these are used basically for emulating metadata on the uh, permissions or the metadata of a header, which means it emulates some sort of a packaging and repackaging sort of attacks for malware. But there exists a large gap in the literature, especially for the case of metamorphic malware, because metamorphic malware doesn't take any of these approaches. These are created by actually changing the code, which gets anonymized at the assembly level of the opcodes. And any sort of a perturbation that is created below this level, which is at the binary level or just a packaging level, doesn't emulate or simulate metamorphic malware, because a binary based perturbation would either render the file either completely unexecutable on the system or will not have the functionality preserving nature. And on the other hand, if you're just changing the headers, it is similar to packaging and repackaging and not a metamorphic malware. And that is where this art comes into the picture. Now we understand why generating obfuscated malware is revolutionary. So the first thing is that we understand that perturbation-based system although could be used to make a classifier more robust against repackaging-based attacks or binary perturbations-based attack, but these type of samples do not ever represent a metamorphic malware that a malware developer would create. And hence, if the intention is to create defenses against metamorphic malware, then these approaches could actually be counterproductive. For one reason, number one, we have seen and many literatures have proved that such sort of a gradient evasion sort of a defense mechanism doesn't actually help improve the classifier for the perspective of a newer form of attacks. In fact, these may create an overfitting sort of a scenario, which may actually be counterproductive. The second is that most of these type of systems actually are newer attacks or zero-day attacks, and hence these are not just an augmentation-based learning system, but these are newer type of learning. Now, why it is challenging to create such a malware through AI is number one, that you can actually replicate these ideas only at the code level or at opcode level. And for any platform, for example, say Windows, there are like thousands of opcodes. And when a code is converted to an assembly language, then we are not talking about just those individual numbers, but a combinations or a permutation of these that actually lead to very specific class of actions. And to have those combinations and combination boards coded into the language actually leads into a very high cardinality action space. In fact, the combinations could be like going into order of magnitude, which couldn't be handled by any of the popular deep learning algorithms or deep reinforcement learning algorithms, even the deep Q networks or other value-based approaches. And that is why we use policy-based reinforcement learning. And instead of using the data to retrain a classifier, because that is what we understood as not a very good idea, and the research has proved that, we want to create a normalization system for malware, which means now when some malware, a metamorphic malware comes, we'll use another subsystem which will use our technology and to deobfuscate the system and take out the obfuscations and take it back to the base variant such that the existing malware defense systems could be used to detect them. This is the architecture of the environment for our ADRL system. We first use multiple detection pipelines to evaluate which is the best pipeline for the different types of metamorphic malware such that they are robust towards all those samples and also high performance. We'll be understanding more of these in the next slide. So this is the DRL agent's training process flow. So here the agent does a type of obfuscation, which is called junk code insertion. So it analyzes the file structure, and then it tries to insert different types of junk codes into the file. And then those files are attracting to the malware detection pipelines of different kind, and a reward is given to the agent. Now, the agents would not converge properly with one single reward, so that we have different types of reward as we discovered in a paper, which helps the agent converge. And using this, we have different types of agent that gets trained and instantiated differently, such that they learn different types of policies of how to create a metamorphic instance of a malware. So each of these agents produces very different types of metamorphic variants of a single file, and then we use that as a simulation. Now we cover the experimental results and observation. As we identified earlier that most of the existing DRL-based algorithms were not be able to either solve the problem or were not sample efficient in solving this problem. And that is why we used a special type of algorithm called proximal policy optimization. The mathematics of this is given in the paper. Now, as a result, after training for several episodes, the agents actually converged very well, and then they learned a very good policy. And because the policy that they were learned, they had actually increased the metamorphism score of the entire corpus of our metamorphic malware by more than 0.45. And for more than 33% of the samples, they were able to take it so high to the metamorphic level that most of the detection pipelines were actually taking them as benign or samples that they have not seen, and hence they couldn't classify. But the problem with deep reinforcement learning based system is that the agents could learn to get high rewards by exploiting trivial tricks that might be oblivious to the game maker, and which may defeat the purpose. So in our work, we actually keep a lot of checks and balances to ensure that the agents are learning a policy for creating metamorphism and not trivial text. For example, we compare a lot of different similarities between the original variant and the metamorphic variant and see if for each of them they are not being converged to a standard structure, but each is closer to the original variant than the standard structures. So in conclusion, we designed and developed a system named XFORM using adversarial deep reinforcement learning and specialized deep reinforcement learning algorithms like the PPO to create metamorphic variants which are obfuscated at the opcode level. The system tries to conduct different types of obfuscations, which could be either junk code insertions or different types of opcode insertions into the file, such that their metamorphic probability could be increased, such that most of the existing malware detection system treats them either as a new type of file system or a benign file system, such that they are not able to detect it. And the objective of creating such a system is that we may use this data to create a malware normalization system for creating effective defenses. With this, we would like to say thank you, and we would like to take any questions, if any.